Good afternoon, this is Keith Aul and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about doing pivot tables with using Python, and in this specific case I'm doing it within Excel. So again, building this pivot table out can be done using standalone Python in your IDE, whether or not that's done through Visual Studio or Jupyter Notebooks. Right now we're going to learn how to do a pivot table using Python, and you're going to learn a popular acronym for you to remember this syntax, and we're going to explain how the pivot table is built out, and at the end we're going to learn how to convert these to percentages, meaning if we have the total revenue here for Canada at roughly 586,000, and we're going to convert that to a percentage of whatever the total is for that particular year for all countries involved. So in other words, we're going to take 586 divided by the grand total down here, and we're going to get a percentage. So first of all, let's learn a little bit about the syntax of the pivot table and learn this popular acronym that you could learn, and it stands for ICAVE. Now over here you could see the syntax that we're going to be using. Now this is one way that you could do it. You could also do PD, which is a pandas alias, okay, pd.pivot table, but if you use that syntax, you will have to add in the parameter data equal whatever your data frame is. Okay, in this particular instance, what I'm going to be using today is I'm going to be passing the data frame itself, so df.pivot table. That way it's going to reference to your specific data frame, and you don't have to pass in this argument here, which is data. So ICAVE stands for, where first of all we're going to use the index parameter. The index parameter means the rows, which is the rows, Canada, which is in this case our country, okay, and our country column. And we're going to use that. That's how data is grouped vertically, as you can see here over to the right. Now C stands for columns. Columns is going to be set to year in this case, because what I want to do is I want to group our data by country and year, and so years is going to be used for the column values over here, as you can see in this example. Okay, the A stands for ag function, which is aggregate. So what do we want to do after we group our data? What do we want to do with that data? Well, in this case, we want to sum something, okay? In our case, then the next parameter, which is V, stands for values, is, again, as you can see here, what are we measuring or aggregating? So in other words, we're going to aggregate our data by country and year, and then we're going to sum those values up. Okay, now these other parameters are not part of basically this, but E stands for extras. In this particular case, we're going to be using some extra parameters, margins and margins underscore name. So in this case, margins equal true. Now, what does that mean? Okay, margins, basically, it adds a row or column labeled and labels it all, ALL, that shows the grand total across all totals. So let's go over here to this example. So in other words, it adds a grand total column here and a grand total at the bottom for these columns here. These are the grand total for the rows, grand total for the columns over here. Now, if you set it to false, then it will use a label up here, grand total, over here, it will set it to all. And I'll show you that in an example as we build this out. But if we set it to true, then you could also use a margins underscore name parameter, and you can make this label whatever you want. So you're able to customize this label. So in this particular case, I customized it using grand total. So that's how that works. So this is the basic syntax. Now let's go over to our data sheet over here, and we're going to build out this pivot table together. So our first step is we want to create our data frame. Okay, basically we want to map out our data set, which is what you see over here. Okay, so we can do that in using Python and Excel. We're going to do the we have to enter the Python command mode, which is equal py, and then you tab into your cell, and then we're going to name our data frame. You could call it anything you want. I'm just calling it df is equal to. Okay, now we're going to select our data range, which is here. We're going to select the headers. Okay, control shift right arrow. Oh, too much. Let's go back here. Let's go over here. Let's erase this. Let's go back to the beginning. Okay, let's select this. Control shift down arrow. Okay, I have my range selected. And now to commit this Python formula, you do control enter. Okay, give it a second to calculate it out. So it came back, and if I click on that, it's going to show our data frame has been selected. And now we're able to access this data frame later on. So our next step is we want to build out this pivot table. So first of all, I'm going to go ahead and type in all the necessary code. Okay, and then we're going to come back to it and explain why it displays this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do enter in the command mode equal py, tab into your cell, and then I'm going to name the pivot table just pivot underscore table. That's going to equal to our data frame that we just created above, and we named it df.pivot table. And then press enter, tab into this. Now we want to do index. Index equal our country column, comma, down, columns. That's going to equal our year column because we're grouping by country and year. And then we're going to use, what do we want to do with this? We want to aggregate it equal sum. Now, what do we want to sum? So basically, what column in our data frame do we want to sum up? And that is going to be set to the values equal revenue. And remember, when we type this stuff in, it has to be exactly, it's case sensitive. So I'm typing it in exactly as we have it here. Okay. Now we're going to comma, and what are the extras are we going to add to it? So margins is equal to true, and we're going to set this to false or eliminate this later on. Or actually, here, this is what I'm going to do here. Okay, and then tab enter. Okay, now control enter, and you'll see what it returns. Okay, just a second, I might have did a typo. Scroll down here, let's see what I did. Pivot table got an unexpected keyword argument. I misspelled ag function. Okay. So it should be AGG. Okay. Control Enter. Okay, we got that. Now basically what we want to return is we want to return escape. So control, what we want to do in Python, it returns, if you go up here to the next to the formula bar, just one way to do it, it created a Python object. We want the Excel value, so it spits out the values here, as you can see here. So now let's look at our code. Let's go up here in our code. See where it says margins equal true? Well, margins equal true, meaning that it's going to add a grand total, basically, for all your rows and for all the columns. And as you can see, it's labeled as ALL. So if you want to customize it, then all you have to do is add the extra parameter, okay, comma, margins underscore name. It's going to equal to grand total. Control Enter. And as you can see, the label is now called grand total instead of all. And if we eliminated these two parameters here, it would not have this grand total to your right, and for the rows and for the columns. So that basically that's what that is. It just makes, if you want to have those totals in there, that's what you add. Now you're probably wondering, why do we have year as a label here and country right underneath here, and all this blank space is over here? So what this means, again, so what this means is when you use columns, let's look up at the syntax up here in the formula bar. Columns equal year in this particular case. When we use that, pandas creates a multi-index for the columns. Now this is because the column access now has two levels, meaning the columns access, which is this right here, the top level, which is the name of the column variable, which is year in our case, and it's referring to this. So this top level is also called index 0 because Python is index based and it starts with 0. Our second level, which is going to be index 1, the actual values from the column. So in other words, year, if we go over to year in our data frame, we have certain values in this column. And the unique values are what gets spit out or displayed above here. So in other words, these are the actual values, and it goes column by column until it uses up all the unique values in our data frame. And then plus it adds the grand total. So that's why we have it this way. So how do we get it to eliminate this year label, bring country back up as a column, and then you won't have this blank space over here? So we're going to do that over here in our next one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to initially copy this, copy and paste this. Okay, Control C, escape out of there. Let's go over here, do an equal PY, tab into it, Control V, Control Enter. And what it'll do, it'll create the same values here. Okay, let's see. Control Shift Alt M is a shortcut key to get the values out, okay? It created the same thing, so we have to add in some extra code to eliminate what we want. So we're going to go back to our formula up here. Press enter a couple times, backspace to get rid of the indentation, and we're going to type in pivot, which is the name of our data frame in this particular case, underscore table dot columns dot name is equal to NONE. And what this does is takes our data frame, which is what we have here, accesses the columns, okay, in this pivot table. In this case, it's the year and also the values associated with that. And it's going to eliminate this name that we had set for it, which is the label name. So that's what none means. So it removes the year label from the columns. Our next step is we want to do a reset index. And we're going to call it pivot equal our pivot table data frame dot reset underscore index, and then control enter. And as you can see, it took the country column, which was previously set as an index of this data frame, and made it a regular column, which is now country. And it removed this year label from there, so it moved it up, and now you have a more presentable data frame or pivot table for you to display in your reports or however you're going to be using this. So basically that's how that works. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to take this pivot table and convert these values to percentages. So I'm just going to give you an example of what I mean. So we're going to take, let's scroll over here. We're going to do an equal PY, tab into this, and I'm going to type in XL, quote, and I'm going to select this value here. In this case, it's an M14. Okay. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to divide that value by our total, which is down here. So all I'm going to do is just select that, but I want to fix it, make it absolute. So I have to go back up here. Okay, press Control Enter. Oops. Give me a second, I'm doing a typo. Hey, I just had a typo and I had to remove an extra XL equal is what I had before. And so basically what this does is take this value here for Canada for 2020 and divide that by the total for all revenue for 2020, and it's going to give us a percentage, which is located over here. Now I'm going to copy this down, and you'll see in a second how we use it later on down here. So let's just copy this down here. Okay. And it calculates, so now this one, it should reference 525 basically and divide it by the total. And we're going to see that it verifies that in a second. So now let's go down here. Let's build out the final pivot table. that creates these sum totals up here to actual percentages. And so what we're going to do, and then I'll explain to you how I go ahead and build this out. So I'm going to do an equal py, tab into this, pivot underscore table is going to be equal to our original data frame dot pivot tab into that. Okay, and then we're going to do an index is equal to country again. And then we're going to do the columns equal to year. Our aggregate function is going to equal to sum in this case, equal to sum. Our values is going to equal to our revenue column. I'll control enter this. Okay, let's see what typo I made. Give me a second. Okay, somewhere I forgot a comma, which is right above here. Okay, Control Shift Alt M. Okay, now let's go ahead and clean this up. Okay. And I'll explain everything. Give me a second. Okay, let's go back up here. We're gonna name and do new data frame. Percent data frame is gonna equal to our pivot table, which we just create above dot div, and I'll explain what this is going in a second. Let me type everything out. Dot sum access equals 0, comma, access equal 1. And then we're going to multiply by times 100 dot round 2. And then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to clean up the headers of this data frame. So we're going to do percent df dot columns dot name equal none. And then we're going to reset the index. Okay, I must have did another typo. Give me a second. Okay, line 8. Which is on this column here. Give me a second. Okay, the error that I was getting, I didn't have a parens right here after the 100. So that's why I was getting that error. So I just put a parens after that 100 and it calculated everything fine. So now let's go step through this. Now if we, again, I use this example over here as a right. And as you can see, these numbers are coming out to be exactly the same, except for I'll show you in the code why I'm getting round to over here. So 16.74 for US, and I got that same over here. It's just over here I'm not rounding to decimal places, okay, to convert them to actual percentages. So let's go back to the code over here. Let's dissect what this line of code is that we have here. So basically, we're going to be doing a calculated column-wise, which is year-wise percentages. So in short so if we look at access, let's go from the inside out. If we use the sum function here, and we're going to be passing in the first part of the argument for div, or basically stands for divide. We're taking access equals 0, and what that means is computes the column-wise totals, meaning it computes these column totals that you see here, which is the total for each particular year. So that's what that means. Now, the second argument to the divide function here, it says access equal 1. So what that means is it's going to take, let's scroll back down here. Yeah. So it's going to take this value here for Canada for 2020, okay? And then it's going to divide that by the total, grand total for that particular year. So that's how that works. So again, stated another way, it divides each row in the pivot table by a corresponding column table or column total, okay? The times 100, after it computes this divide here, it takes the value that it gets and it times it by 100. So let's go ahead and calculate this out to see what value it has before it times it by 100. So I'm going to pull up my calculator function here. Okay, let's scroll over here just a bit. Give it a second to recompute, okay? So let's bring up the calculator. So what I'm going to first take is I'm going to take 586, 507, divide that by the grand total for that year, 239, 6420, 6420. And that's going to equal to this long number, which is what you see here, okay? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to take that value, times it by 2, equal, okay, give it a second. Okay, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have times it by 2. I have to times it by 1. So it takes this, which has no decimal place, it times it by 100. That gives you 24.47. So that's a percentage of that particular year. So this year, so in other words, it takes that calculation, 586 divided by 239, 6420, and it comes up with this percentage. So that's the percentage of Canada's revenue by country and by year. So that's basically what that is doing above here. So that's, in a nutshell, a common example of how we could take our data. In this particular case, we wanted to learn how to get the percentage of total revenue by country and year and build out a pivot table using Python and Excel. I'm going to do more examples in the future regarding pivot tables, and I'll compare them also probably to how do you do the exact same thing within Excel itself. I hope you enjoyed this video today. I hope you got some knowledge out of it and that you could use it in your day-to-day activities as probably as a data analyst and as you're working with Python within Excel. Again, I want to thank you for stopping by. You have a great day, and remember to subscribe to my channel, and as always, please like and share this because this helps get this video out to other people so other people can learn about this, how to build out pivot tables. Again, thank you and have a great day.